After a fight, my daughter canceled my flight and left me stranded at Dubai airport. No phone, no wallet. A multi-millionaire stepped up and whispered, "Pretend you're my wife. My driver is almost here." Then he said, "Your daughter will regret this." Have you ever been betrayed so completely by your own blood that a total stranger became your only hope? My daughter left me for dead, 68 years old, alone in a foreign airport. But what happened next? What I did next? It changed everything. I can still see her face. My own daughter, Renata, clutching my handbag to her chest like some twisted trophy. She looked straight into my eyes, a cold, empty smile playing on her lips, and then she just walked away. I stood there, utterly numb, in the blinding light of that airport terminal. The icy air conditioning prickled my skin, a cold panic spreading through me. The hum of foreign voices, the biting smell of expensive perfume and bitter coffee, it all swirled around me, making my empty stomach twist. I was 68 years old, wearing a wrinkled beige blouse, feeling my blood pressure rocket, my fingers tingling. I knew that feeling. I was close to fainting. Just 15 minutes before, Renata had exploded at the check-in counter. She screamed that I was a burden, that I drained her energy, that she was sick of funding my luxuries. Luxuries. I remember that word echoing in my head as I watched travelers with their designer luggage. I was there because I'd saved every penny of my pension for 2 years, just for this one small dream, to see the desert at sunset, to remind myself the world was still vast, still beautiful, beyond the walls of my quiet home. But Renata had insisted on coming along. "To make sure you don't blow your money and come begging again," she'd said. A fragile part of me had agreed, hoping maybe, just maybe, this trip could bring us closer. That we could finally talk, honestly. That she'd stop looking at me with that silent, crushing resentment I never understood. The argument itself started over something so stupid. I'd simply asked the airline clerk if I could change my seat to a window. A tiny, simple request. But Renata took it as an insult, a direct challenge, because she was paying for the entire trip. She leaned in close, her voice a chilling whisper, "You pathetic mother. You always have been." Then, she smiled sweetly at the attendant, as if nothing had happened. And then she dropped the real bomb. "Dad died because he wanted to escape you. He just wanted to breathe in a world without your mediocrity." My heart absolutely clenched. My husband, George, had died 25 years ago in a car accident. And ever since, Renata had weaponized that grief against me. I tried to take a deep breath, to hold back the tears burning behind my eyes. But before I could say a single word, she yanked my brown leather bag right out of my hand. My mother's last gift to me. And she just walked away. "Renata! My documents!" I called, my voice trembling, breaking. She didn't even look back. She just kept walking, her blonde hair gleaming in the airport lights like a shampoo commercial. For a moment, a stupid, hopeful moment, I thought it was just a fit of anger. But it wasn't. She walked straight through security, not a single backward glance. That's when it hit me. My boarding pass was utterly useless without the documents she'd stolen. She had planned this. She wanted to humiliate me one last time and leave me stranded in a foreign country. A wave of pure, gut-wrenching panic rose inside me. First denial, then a cold rage, and finally, a terror so absolute it made my knees buckle. I was in a strange land. No passport, no money, no phone. No one knew where I was. My mind was reeling, but instinct took over. I stumbled toward a security guard, trying to explain in my broken English. They looked at me with suspicion, already reaching for their radio. And then he was just there. A tall man, silver hair neatly combed, wearing a suit so perfect it seemed to hum. He leaned in slightly, his amber eyes, so full of a strange mix of curiosity and something I couldn't quite place, met mine. "Are you in trouble?" he asked, his English gentle. Before I could even form a coherent thought, his tone dropped. "Steady, urgent. Pretend to be my wife. My driver is coming. Trust me. Ask questions later." He took my hand, a light, reassuring touch, and whispered, "Your daughter will regret leaving you here. I promise." I looked from his face to the suspicious guards, to the cold, cavernous terminal, and then I made the most reckless decision of my entire life. I gripped his hand. "Take me with you," I heard myself say. In that single, desperate moment, I finally understood something profound. I had spent my whole life waiting for someone else to save me, my husband, my daughter. And they had both abandoned me. Maybe it was time. Maybe it was time to take the hand of a complete stranger and see who I was when I had absolutely no one left to rely on. A sleek, black Mercedes, elegant but discreet, pulled up to the curb. The driver, in white gloves, opened the back door. The man gestured to me. "Please." I slid in. The cabin smelled of new leather, polished wood. The seat was unbelievably soft, a shocking contrast to the utter chaos of moments before. He followed, closed the door, and a heavy silence filled the car as it pulled away. I watched the airport lights shrink in the rearview mirror. And then, the reality hit me. I had just gotten into a stranger's car in a foreign country. "Take a deep breath," he said, not looking at me. "I know this is insane, but you're safe now." My voice trembled. "Why are you helping me?" He turned then, and in the dim light of the cabin, I saw the fine wrinkles around his eyes, a thin scar above his eyebrow, and a quiet weariness. The kind of weariness that comes from seeing too much loss. "My name is Khaled Rashid," he said. "I'm 72, born in Saudi Arabia, but I lived 20 years in the U.S. I run companies in Dubai, New York, Los Angeles." His voice slowed, almost broke, on the next sentence. "I lost my wife 8 months ago." He looked at me, really looked at me. I recognized that kind of pain. "I'm so sorry," I whispered. He nodded. "I saw your daughter take your bag. I saw the way she smiled. I know that cruelty. My son wears the same smile when he tries to outsmart me. So you just help strangers because of that?" I asked, disbelief creeping into my voice. He calmly straightened his cuff. "I need an exchange. Nothing immoral. I need you to pretend to be my wife for a few hours, maybe a few days." I almost laughed, it was so absurd. But the seriousness in his face silenced me. "You can't be serious." "I am," he said simply. "Tomorrow, I have a meeting with very conservative investors. They don't trust widowers. They think we're unstable, too emotional. My wife always attended those meetings with me. Without her, I lose credibility. I can't afford to lose this deal. It's worth $400 million. $400 million. The number absolutely stunned me. "You could hire an actress," I blurted. "I tried," he sighed. "But they looked exactly like what they were, paid performers. No one believed them. But you—" He paused, his gaze softening. "You have the eyes of someone who has truly lost something. They'll believe you." "This is madness," I muttered, shaking my head. "Yes," he agreed. "But do you really have another choice? Go back to the airport with no ID? Call your daughter, the one who just abandoned you? Or accept my offer? Stay in a safe room, eat a decent meal, and we talk again in the morning." He was right. Utterly, completely right. I had nowhere else to go. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became, not at him, but at Renata. My own daughter had made me so helpless, so desperate, that I now had to take the hand of a stranger just to survive. "If I agree," I asked softly, my voice barely a whisper, "what exactly do you want me to do?" "Tomorrow," he explained, "you just have to dress elegantly. Smile beside me for a few hours at dinner. Act comfortable. No affection needed, just a quiet familiarity. The kind shared by people who've known each other a long time. And don't deny anything I say." He paused, then added, "In return, I'll provide lodging, meals, a phone so you can contact anyone you want. And when this is over, you'll receive $15,000. $15,000. That was 5 months of my pension, more than I'd seen in years. I studied him, trying to read his intentions. "Why should I trust you?" He gave a faint, almost sad smile. "You don't have to. But ask yourself, do you have any other option? If I meant to harm you," he continued, "would I be giving you money? A phone? Clear terms? I could take you anywhere. But I'm being honest, because for some strange reason, I think we might just help each other." The car turned onto a gleaming bridge. Ahead, the city of Dubai shimmered like a jewel in the desert. Skyscrapers pierced the clouds, lights glittered in the night. A world so utterly removed from anything I'd ever known. Maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what I needed. Because the world I came from, the one where I was a quiet, obedient mother, content to take whatever scraps of affection were left, had just completely thrown me away. I looked at Khaled again, really looked at him. He was exhausted too, I realized, holding his empire together while the people who should have loved him had betrayed him instead. I saw in him the same aching loneliness I carried, the kind that comes when your own child sees you as a burden. "All right," I heard myself say, the words a shock even to my own ears. "I'll be your wife, but on one condition." He raised an eyebrow, a flicker of surprise in his weary eyes. "What's that?" "You help me find out what my daughter has done." I swallowed hard, the bitterness rising in my throat. "She brought me here just to abandon me. And once I know the truth, you help me make sure she never does it to anyone else again." Khaled extended his hand, his grip firm. "We have a deal, Denise." I took it, and in that moment, I knew I had stepped into a turning point I could never undo. When the ground disappears beneath you, sometimes the only thing left to do is learn how to fly, even if it means flying alongside a stranger. Khaled's villa was on Palm Jumeirah, that incredible man-made island shaped like a palm tree that I'd only ever seen in glossy magazines. The gates swung open, revealing a cobblestone driveway lit by tiny, embedded lights. Tall, elegant palm trees lined the path to the house, a beautiful blend of traditional Arabic style and modern architecture. White archways, massive glass windows, a turquoise fountain shimmering in the courtyard. As I stepped out of the car, the ocean breeze carried the scent of salt and jasmine, mixing with the warm desert air. My simple sandals touched the cool marble, and a fleeting, absurd thought crossed my mind. Don't you dare dirty this floor. A woman in her 40s appeared at the entrance. She wore a deep purple dress, a silk scarf, her eyes calm and unbelievably kind. "This is Mara," Khaled said. "She's the housekeeper, worked for me for years in Europe." "It's a pleasure, Mrs. Denise," Mara said in a gentle, accented voice. "Your room is ready. You must be exhausted." Exhausted didn't even begin to cover it. Before I followed her upstairs, Khaled lightly touched my arm. "You'll need clothes," he said. "Tomorrow, Mara will take you shopping for the dinner event. For now, get some rest." He hesitated, then added, "Thank you, Denise. I know this is strange, but you won't regret it." I climbed the marble staircase behind Mara, the sound of my own footsteps echoing in the quiet, cavernous space. The guest room was massive, bigger than my entire living room back home. White sheets soft as clouds, a deep soaking tub, a balcony overlooking the dark, glittering sea. A plush white robe and slippers waited by the bed. "Whenever you need anything, just press this button," Mara instructed, pointing to a small control panel. "I'll bring you tea and something light to eat. You haven't had dinner, have you?" After she left, I sank onto the edge of the bed and finally, utterly, broke down. I didn't just cry. I sobbed. Deep, guttural, heartbroken sobs that felt like they'd been trapped inside me for years, just waiting to erupt. I cried for myself, for Renata, for everything. I didn't know if I was brave or simply insane. Mara returned later with a beautiful silver tray, mint tea, warm bread, dates, a few slices of cheese. I ate automatically, the familiar taste strangely grounding me. Then I remembered, Khaled had promised me a phone. I went downstairs barefoot, drawn by the sound of his voice coming from his study. He was speaking Arabic, his tone commanding, authoritative. When he saw me, he motioned for me to come in. He ended his call and handed me a brand new phone, still in its box, with an international SIM card. "You can call anywhere. This is my number. If you need anything, call me." I held it like it was the most precious treasure. I immediately dialed my sister Eleanor in Ohio. It was still dawn there, but she picked up right away. Her sleepy voice quickly turned to panic. "Denise, oh my God, where are you?" "Renata called. She said you disappeared at the airport." "Disappeared?" My blood was boiling. "She said you two argued, and when she turned around, you were just gone. She's worried sick." Eleanor paused, her voice laced with confusion. "Denise, what's going on?" I told her everything. Every single, horrifying detail. There was a heavy silence on the other end, the kind that comes before a storm. She lied. Eleanor finally said, her voice trembling with anger. And honestly, I'm not surprised. There's something you need to know. My chest tightened. What? 3 months ago, Renata called me. She asked about the value of your house. Said you were losing your mind, and that she needed to protect the family's assets before you did something reckless. She wanted me to sign papers declaring you legally incompetent. I froze. Did you sign them? Of course not. Eleanor nearly shouted. I kicked her out of my house. But Denise, she said something that gave me chills. She said, Mom killed Dad, and she's going to pay for it. Even if it takes me the rest of my life to make her pay. The elegant room seemed to shrink around me. She really believes that? I whispered, my voice barely audible. She believes I killed my husband? No one's to blame, my sister said softly, gently. It was an accident. He lost control. No, I said, my throat tightening, the truth finally, reluctantly, surfacing. He'd been drinking. The report made it clear. But I hid that from Renata. She was 15. I didn't want her to grow up hating her father. I lied. I told her the accident was caused by a mechanical failure. I took a shaky breath. She had always idolized him, always compared me to him, and I was always the one who came up short. Then she started to believe it was my fault he left that night. We argued and he stormed out. He never came back. Eleanor was silent for a long time before asking the only question that truly mattered. So what will you do now? I looked around the impossibly elegant room, thought of Khaled downstairs, and then I thought of Renata, probably already on her way back to the U.S., convinced she'd finally gotten rid of me. I'll survive, I said, the words firm, strong. I'll help Khaled, take the money, and then I'll go back to face her with the truth. All of it. I sat there in the dark, thinking. For 25 years, I had carried the crushing guilt of my husband's death. I had endured my daughter's contempt, letting it wash over me as some twisted form of punishment. But that night, in the foreign stillness of Dubai, something inside me shifted. Maybe it was pure exhaustion. Maybe it was a spark of anger, finally igniting. Or maybe, just maybe, it was because for the first time in decades, someone had looked at me, not as a guilty mother, but as a human being worth saving. I finally lay down on that cloud-soft bed, and, for the first time in what felt like forever, I truly fell asleep. The next morning, sunlight poured through the silk curtains. The ocean shimmered beyond the balcony, and a new, steely determination rose in me. Renata wanted me to pay for the past. Fine. I would start collecting what the present owed me, with interest. Mara knocked on the door, bringing breakfast, Turkish coffee, fresh fruit, and the rather daunting news that I had exactly 3 hours to become the wife of a billionaire. I looked in the mirror. My tangled silver hair, hollow eyes, the deep-etched wrinkles of a lifetime. But Mara knew exactly what to do. She whisked me away to a luxury boutique in the Dubai Mall. The staff's entire attitude shifted the moment they heard the name Khaled Rashid. I tried on dozens of dresses, each one worth more than several months of my pension. Finally, I chose a deep navy gown. Elegant, slimming, confident, the kind of composure years in hotel management had taught me. Mid-heel shoes, a delicate strand of pearls, my hair swept into a neat bun. When I looked at my reflection, I barely recognized myself. Not because I looked different, but because it had been so long since I dressed for me, not to please anyone else. We returned home. Khaled was swimming in the pool, each stroke powerful and precise. When he emerged, water dripping, I noticed faint scars across his body. Stories he hadn't told. Perfect, he said, wrapping a towel around himself, a slight smile playing on his lips. They'll believe it instantly. Khaled, I called before he walked away. I need to know about your wife. The one I'm supposed to be. He turned, his expression softening, a shadow passing over his eyes. Lila, my wife. She died of cancer. 8 months of agony. It drained everything, emotionally and financially. The experimental treatments in Switzerland, they cost a fortune. He sank onto a lounge chair, looking older than his years. My son, Rashid, saw it as weakness. He tried to make me sign over power of attorney, to take control of the company while I was still alive. I refused. After that, he started spreading rumors, saying I was senile, unfit to lead. Tomorrow's deal is my only chance to prove I'm still capable. But those investors are extremely conservative. A lonely widower doesn't inspire trust. They think I'll act recklessly, make desperate decisions. Khaled let out a humorless laugh. And maybe I did. I let you into my car. Point taken, I said, a small smile touching my lips. We spent the entire afternoon rehearsing. He told me about his company, which imported and exported luxury fabrics and spices, headquartered in Riyadh with branches in 15 countries. He taught me the names of his partners and the intricate details of our fictional marriage. We had to be consistent, after all. We'd met at a conference in Rio 30 years ago. He had a son named Rashid. I had a daughter named Renata. We honeymooned in Santorini. All elegant lies. Yet, between those practice lines, bits of truth slipped through. Khaled told me Lila had loved gardening. Her hands could make roses bloom in the desert, he said. In her final days, she'd held his hand and whispered, "Don't let Rashid destroy what we built." I, in turn, told him about my husband, George, a brilliant civil engineer who understood the limits of bridges, but not his own. I told him about the crushing debts after George died. Debts I paid in silence, even when it meant selling the ranch I grew up on. Renata never knew the real cost. I even admitted I'd kept every single receipt and transfer in a box back home, because one day I might need proof that I wasn't the useless mother she believed I was. Has she accused you of anything else? Khaled asked, his voice low. I nodded. At the airport, she said her father died trying to escape me, that I was the burden he couldn't stand. And you believed that for 25 years? He asked softly, almost a challenge. I looked out at the dark, glittering water of the pool. Not anymore. I took a deep breath. Now I know George died because he was drunk, driving nearly 100 miles an hour on an empty road after learning his project had collapsed. He died because he was too proud to ask for help, too proud to admit failure. Does Renata know? He asked. No, I said, the word heavy. But maybe it's time. Khaled nodded. Tomorrow, after dinner, I'll transfer the $15,000 I promised. But I can help you with more. What kind of help? My lawyer can secure your assets in the U.S. Make sure Renata can't declare you incompetent, or sell your home, or seize anything that belongs to you. He stood up, a new energy in his movements. I have a feeling this fight is just beginning. And he was right, though neither of us knew just how brutal it would become. That evening, as I was getting ready for the investor dinner, my new phone buzzed. A text from Renata. My heart lurched. I've reported you missing. I filed for emergency guardianship, and I'm pushing for temporary control of your assets. Come home now and cooperate, or you'll never control anything again. I read it twice, my vision blurring, then I read it again. And then, for the first time in 25 years, I smiled. A slow, chilling smile. Because she had no idea. No idea I had proof. No idea I had allies. The weak woman she once knew? She had died at the Dubai airport that day. What remained was someone else entirely. A woman with nothing left to lose. That night, we arrived at the restaurant on the top floor of the Burj Al Arab, that iconic sail-shaped tower stretching out into the sea. We didn't take a Mercedes. Too ordinary for the occasion, Khaled had said, with a rare, mischievous glint in his eye as we stepped into a Rolls-Royce. 3 Arab investors were waiting, all around 60, impeccably dressed, their eyes sharp, missing nothing. Khaled introduced me in Arabic, then in English, his hand resting lightly on my back. A gesture both protective and, to the outside world, intimately familiar. When he pulled out my chair, our eyes met, and for a fleeting moment, I saw genuine gratitude there. Most of the conversation was in Arabic. I smiled when needed, sipped water, listened. One man, Ibrahim, constantly twisted a ring on his pinky finger as he thought. The second, Mahmoud, laughed loudly, slapping the table whenever he agreed. The third, Faisal, said almost nothing, his eyes keen and watchful, like a hawk's. It was Faisal who eventually turned to me, his English accented but clear. Mrs. Rashid, your husband says you have experience in hospitality. Tell us about it. The table fell silent. Khaled tensed slightly beside me. I slowly set down my glass, took a deep breath, and decided right then and there I would answer with the truth. I worked 32 years in the hotel industry, I said, my voice steady, confident. From front desk to operations manager at a 4-star hotel in Florida, supervising over 90 employees. When I left, our occupancy rate was 94%, and we held the Excellence Award 8 years in a row. They were quiet for a moment. Then Ibrahim asked, "Why did you leave?" I could have lied, made up some elegant excuse. But I looked at Khaled and saw in his eyes the same exhaustion I felt. The exhaustion of living behind masks. "My husband died," I said simply. "I had to raise my daughter. When she grew up, I realized I'd forgotten who I was beyond being a mother and a widow. So, I retired early and I disappeared from the world." The table was utterly silent. Mahmoud stopped laughing. Faisal tilted his head, reassessing me. Finally, Ibrahim nodded slowly. "Honesty, rare in our business," he murmured. The atmosphere visibly eased after that. They began discussing plans to open a boutique hotel chain across the Middle East. Khaled presented projections, figures, strategies. When he paused, Ibrahim asked, "Does your wife agree with this investment?" The unscripted question caught Khaled completely off guard. I glanced at the tablet on the table, scanning the numbers. 30 years in hospitality had trained my eye. "Your projections for Dubai are too optimistic," I said calmly, looking up. "But Oman is undervalued. There's untapped potential there." The room went silent. Khaled looked at me, a mix of surprise and genuine impressed awe on his face. Then Ibrahim laughed heartily. "Khaled, my friend, your wife understands the business better than half our advisors. We'll sign, but on the condition that she reviews the Oman plan." 3 hours later, we returned to the villa. The $400 million deal was signed. I, the woman once abandoned in an airport, had just helped close it. Khaled poured 2 glasses of tamarind juice, and we sat on the terrace overlooking the moonlit sea. "I'm sorry," I said softly, a blush creeping up my neck. "I shouldn't have interfered. I ruined your script." He turned to me, a real, genuine smile spreading across his face, lighting up his eyes. "Ruined, Denise. You saved me. Ibrahim was testing if you were genuine. You passed." I smiled back. 30 years in the industry teaches you to spot mistakes, I guess. "No," he said, his voice softer now. "Talent." Then he set his glass down, his voice slower, more serious. "I have a proposal. And this one, it's not pretend." My stomach tightened. "What kind of proposal?" "Marry me. For real. 6 months. A legal contract." He held up a hand. "Hear me out first. You'll receive $850,000 deposited into a private account. Untouchable. You'll live here as a consultant for our hotel projects, earning $35,000 a month. Full legal protection. My lawyer will ensure Renata can't touch your assets back in the U.S. "Why would you do that?" I asked, utterly bewildered. "Because Rashid is trying to remove me from the company," he explained. "A real marriage, with a wife who is active in the business, will crush the narrative that I'm frail or isolated." He looked directly into my eyes. "And because I see in you something I haven't seen in years. A person who understands my world and can help me defend it. After 6 months, we'll divorce amicably. You'll keep the money, the connections, your independence. Go back to America or stay. It's your choice. But I promise you, Renata will never make you feel small again. You'll have real freedom." I looked at him. The offer was outrageous, beyond imagination. But in his eyes, I saw my own reflection. Wealthy yet lonely, betrayed by family, clinging to the last remnants of dignity. "I have conditions," I said, my voice steady despite the whirlwind in my mind. He nodded, listening intently. "First, your lawyer doesn't just protect my assets. He investigates Renata. If she sold my house illegally, forged documents, or committed any crime. I want proof." Khaled's nod was sharp. "Done." "Second, this is strictly a business marriage. Separate rooms, separate lives. We only appear together when necessary. Mutual respect. Nothing more." "Agreed completely." "Third," I hesitated, then spoke the words that had been a silent scream inside me for decades. "If I ever become a burden, if I make you regret this, let me go. I've spent my whole life being seen as a burden to my daughter. I won't live that way again." Khaled set his glass down, looked straight at me, and gently placed both hands on my shoulders. His touch was warm, comforting. "Denise," he said, his voice soft, sincere. "You are not a burden. You never were. Your daughter created that story to justify her cruelty. But I've seen you today. Smart, strong, and worthy of living your life again." He smiled, a genuine, heartwarming smile. "I accept all your conditions, but I have one of my own. You must promise to stop apologizing for existing." Tears welled in my eyes, not from sadness, but from a feeling I had almost forgotten the name of. Maybe it was hope. "We have a deal," I whispered. 3 days later, Khaled and I signed the marriage papers at a government registry office in Dubai. A 6-month contract. The ceremony was cold and quick, attended only by a few professional witnesses. No flowers, no music, no romance. Just signatures on papers that irrevocably changed the course of my life. When I returned to the villa as Denise Rashid, I took a photo of our marriage certificate and sent Renato a single text. "I'm alive. I'm married. And from now on, you have no power over me. See you in America when I decide to return." Her reply came instantly. "Have you lost your mind?" I smiled at the screen. Maybe, I thought to myself, but it was the sanest madness of my life. The next 4 months, they were the most intense I had ever lived. Khaled hadn't been joking when he said I'd actually be working. Just 2 days after our marriage registration, I was already sitting in meetings, reviewing blueprints for hotels still under construction. At 68 years old, my schedule suddenly became busier than I ever thought possible. I was waking up at 6 a.m., gulping down coffee, and joining online meetings with architects across 3 continents. Lunches turned into working meals where I was introduced, not as Mr. Rashid's wife, but as a hotel operations consultant. I rediscovered talents that had been dormant for years. My time managing the Excelsior Hotel hadn't just kept me afloat. It had sharpened my eye for efficiency, for process, for every minute detail. I took the Oman project, the one I'd first commented on at that investor dinner, and turned it into a full feasibility study. When I presented it, Sheikh Ibrahim was so impressed he asked me to fly to Muscat to meet the local partners and report in person. I flew alone, wearing a sand-colored suit Mara had picked out, carrying a tablet with a presentation I'd spent 3 weeks perfecting. 10 men initially looked at me like I was decorative. 15 minutes later, they were taking notes. 30 minutes later, they were asking about seasonal occupancy rates and operational cost management. I closed the deal. On my own. When I returned to Dubai, Khaled was waiting with non-alcoholic champagne and a smile that truly lit up his tired face. "You're extraordinary," he said. "I was afraid you'd be intimidated, but you were brilliant. You know," he continued, pouring more champagne. "Ibrahim said you have more strategic vision than the consultants he pays $50,000 per report." I took a sip and felt something long lost return, pride. Not the kind that comes from pleasing others, but the kind that comes from proving yourself. Meanwhile, back in the U.S., Renata was completely losing control. Eleanor, my sister, kept me updated. Renata had filed a petition in court, claiming I was being manipulated by a foreign man. She tried to freeze my bank accounts, tried to finalize the sale of my house. But she ran straight into Khaled's legal team. He had assembled 3 lawyers, sharp, relentless, dismantling every single move she made with documents I hadn't even known existed. And then I learned the truth. Khaled's legal team had uncovered enough evidence to take Renata to court, evidence detailed in a report, so thick it made my hands shake just holding it. I didn't read it once. I read it again and again, until the denial finally died. "We can press criminal charges," the lead attorney, Mr. Harrison, said during a virtual meeting. "Forgery, embezzlement, and fraud. She could face between 2 and 6 years in prison." I stayed silent, staring at the documents. That was my daughter, the child I once cradled in my arms, the teenager who had cried on my shoulder when her father died, and now, the woman who had stolen everything I owned. Finally, I spoke quietly. "Not yet. Keep everything, but don't act." Khaled looked at me, surprised. "Why? She deserves to be punished." "Yes," I said. "But if I act now, people will say you manipulated me. They'll claim I'm seeking revenge out of emotion. I need to go back to America, look her in the eye, and let her see that I am her equal, not her victim. If she still tries to destroy me after that, then I'll strike back. Khaled smiled faintly. You really are a strategist. 30 years of dealing with difficult hotel guests comes in handy, I said, a dry laugh escaping me. Renata is just another client. The only difference is at this time, I can fire her. That night, I sat alone at my laptop and wrote a letter. Not to Renata, but to myself. I listed every sacrifice, every lie I had swallowed, every time I'd made myself smaller so she could feel bigger. Not to complain, but to remember. To never forget the true cost of loving a child who turned affection into manipulation. Meanwhile, my life in Dubai began to bloom in ways I never imagined. Mara and I became close friends. She taught me how to cook Middle Eastern dishes, sharing stories of her life. A failed marriage in Portugal, the decision to run away and start anew in Dubai. I met other women at social events, all expatriates like me. We formed a small circle, meeting every Thursday for coffee and conversation. Ingrid, a 65-year-old Danish woman, told us she divorced at 60 after years of abuse and now owned a thriving art gallery. Yuki, a 71-year-old Japanese woman, ran 3 restaurants after being thrown out by her children who had called her a burden. Their stories were different, but the pain? The pain was the same. Each of us had once been made to feel invisible, disposable, until we stood up and reclaimed our space. One day, Ingrid said, holding her teacup, You know, Denise, loneliness from being abandoned hurts far more than loneliness you choose. I'd rather be alone and be myself than surrounded by people who make me small. I held on to that sentence like a lifeline. When the 4th month of our contract marriage arrived, Khaled called me into his office. His tone was calm, serious, just like the day we met. The contract has 2 months left. I need to know what you plan to do after. The question stunned me, because for the first time in my life, I truly had a choice. I had money, a career, and a life of my own. I'm not sure, I admitted. I need to return to the U.S. to settle things with Renata, to close that chapter. Then I looked at him, a new thought forming. I want to come back. Not as a wife, but as a partner. I want to keep working, to finish the Oman project. Khaled smiled a rare, genuine smile that made him look years younger. Then we'll have much to discuss about renewing the contract. But fate, as it always does, found a way to interfere. 3 days later, as I was reviewing the Muscat Hotel blueprints, my phone rang. It was Eleanor. Her voice was tense, ragged. Denise, Renata's coming to Dubai. She bought a ticket. She lands tomorrow. I felt my blood turn to ice. How does she know where I live? No idea, but she's furious. She's posting online, saying she's going to rescue her mother from an international con artist. She's rallying people, turning it into a spectacle. Eleanor paused, a gasp of breath. Denise, she's coming for a fight. I hung up, gripping the phone tightly, my breath heavy in my chest. Renata wanted war. Then war she would have, but this time, the battlefield was mine. And I held weapons she didn't even know existed. And if God still had mercy to give, he'd better give it to her. Because I had none left. She arrived like a storm. No doorbell, no warning. She waited for a flower delivery to enter through the gate, then marched in, her heels clicking sharply against the polished stone, the sound echoing ominously through the grand hall. I was in the living room, reviewing contracts, when I heard her shout my name. Khaled was in his office. Mara ran over in a panic, but I gestured for her to stop. I took a deep breath, straightened my ivory linen dress, and stepped into the foyer. Renata stood there, her blonde hair tangled, dark circles under her eyes, smudged makeup, wrinkled jeans. Nothing of the polished woman she once was. But it was her eyes that froze me. The burning, toxic hatred that had been brewing for years. I thought I'd have to call the police to get into your billionaire husband's fortress, she screamed, her voice sharp, venomous. Once, those words might have broken me. Not now. Renata, I said, my voice calm, steady. You just trespassed on private property. You didn't even bother to ring the bell. A bell, she sneered, stepping closer, pointing a finger at me, accusing. You disappear for 4 months, marry a stranger, and now you're lecturing me on manners? I just expect you to behave like an adult. An adult! She threw her purse to the floor. The sound cracked like thunder. I know what you're doing. You sold yourself to this old rich man, and now you think you can humiliate me. Erase me. Khaled stepped out from the upper floor, looking down, his face unreadable. Renata's eyes flared with raw hatred. So it's you, the scam artist who brainwashed my mother. Khaled's voice turned icy, a dangerous calm. Watch your words. I am your mother's legal husband, with full documentation and witnesses. Renata laughed, a bitter, broken sound. My mother is 68, lost at an airport, and suddenly marries a billionaire? Any judge would call that manipulation. Any judge would look at the facts, I replied, still calm, shockingly calm. And the facts are, you deliberately abandoned me, canceled my ticket, took my documents and money, and disappeared just to teach me a lesson. Renata screamed then, a raw, primal sound, and the mask she'd worn for years finally shattered. Yes, to make you see you can't keep draining me, manipulating me, using me like your personal ATM. The reversal stunned me for a few seconds. I manipulated you? I asked, disbelief in my voice. Renata trembled, her eyes blazing. You made me feel guilty my whole life. Guilty for being born. Guilty for needing things. Guilty for surviving while Dad died running from you. Your father didn't run, I said, my voice rising. But she shouted over me, don't lie. Then she grabbed a ceramic vase from the table and hurled it against the wall. The crash echoed through the hall like a gunshot. Mara rushed in, terrified, and Khaled started down the stairs. But I signaled for them to stop. I needed to see this through. You killed my father, Renata spat, her voice low but venomous. With your nagging, your bitterness, your mediocrity. He was brilliant. He could have gone far. But you dragged him down, locked him in that tiny house, that tiny life, with a tiny wife. And when he tried to breathe, you pushed him down that road. You're wrong, I said slowly, deliberately. I was home when your father left. You know that. Yes. You were home, as always. Resentful, heavy, always a burden. The room fell into a thick, suffocating silence. Khaled wanted to step in, I could see it, but I held up my hand. This was it. This was the moment to say everything. Before I could speak, Renata bent down, pulling a stack of papers from her bag. I came prepared, she said, regaining some twisted composure. I have proof that you're being exploited, that this marriage is a scam. He's just after your money. She paused, a smirk curling her lips. Or whatever's left after you squandered Grandma's inheritance. The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. Grandma's inheritance? I asked, my voice breaking despite myself. You mean the ranch I sold to pay off the debts of the father you idolized? Squandered? Yes, she shouted, triumphant. That ranch was worth $2.8 million, and you sold it. The money vanished. You didn't invest. You didn't build. You didn't plan for the future. Where is it? All of it, I said, my voice a dangerous whisper. Went to pay your father's debts. She froze. Lies. No. I stepped closer, my voice gaining strength. He owed contractors, suppliers, investors more than $2.4 million. I found out after the funeral. And do you know what happens if those debts aren't paid? They sue the widow, seize the house, erase the family's name. I sold the ranch, every acre of red soil your grandmother farmed for 50 years. I paid every debt and kept just enough for your education. Renata's fists clenched. Liar. The insurance paid for my college. The insurance, I shot back, was $85,000. Barely enough for the funeral and 3 months of expenses. Your tuition was $5,300 a month for 5 years. Who do you think paid the rest? I stepped closer, now only a few feet away. I worked double shifts, skipped meals, so you'd have food when you came home. I wore old clothes, so you wouldn't be embarrassed standing next to me at your graduation. Renata's face went utterly pale, but she didn't back down. If you really did all that, you would have bragged about it long ago. I looked straight at her, my eyes blazing. Because I loved you more than my own pride. I thought one day you'd understand that love doesn't have to be shouted to be real love. She laughed, but it broke halfway through. You call it love when you suffocate me? Make me feel like I owe you for existing? I never asked you for anything. You didn't have to ask, I said quietly. You demanded it through silence. She pointed a trembling finger at me. You've always played the saint, always the victim, always comparing me to Dad, saying he'd be proud of you. I've been nothing but his shadow in your eyes. And in that moment, for the first time, I finally understood. For 25 years, she hadn't hated me over money. She'd hated that she'd spent her life competing with a dead man. And I, trying desperately to fill the void George left behind, had unknowingly used his memory as a weapon that wounded my own child. You're right, I said, and saw Renata freeze, caught off guard. I did that. I made your father the measure of everything. That was my mistake. She softened for a second, a flicker of something in her eyes. But I continued, my tone turning cold, hard. But that mistake doesn't excuse what you've done. You illegally sold my house, forged my signature, took out loans in my name, and abandoned me in a foreign country. Renata stammered, scrambling. I was going to come back for you. Lies! Khaled interrupted, his voice like ice, descending the stairs, tablet in hand. We have evidence. Bank records show you transferred $680,000 into your joint account with your husband. And here are the messages between the two of you, planning to keep your mother out of the country long enough to claim everything legally. Renata turned ghostly white. How? How did you get that? I looked at her, steady. Because you underestimated me. You had no idea who your mother would become once she stopped apologizing for being alive. She stared at me for a long moment, and the hatred in her eyes slowly gave way to fear. She stepped back, tripping slightly over the carpet. You're lying, she tried to shout, but her voice shook brittle. You couldn't possibly have my private messages. Khaled swiped the screen, zoomed in, and handed it to her. The familiar interface showed every line clearly. I've delayed my mother's flight. Need 2 more days to finalize the house sale. If she returns early, say she's mentally unstable. I have 2 doctor friends ready to sign a competency report if necessary. Renata stared at the screen, her lips trembling. This is a violation of privacy. It's not admissible. It is, came a man's voice from the doorway. Mr. Harrison stepped in, wearing a sharp gray suit, a leather briefcase in hand. Mrs. Denise granted me full legal authority to investigate any criminal activity involving her assets. All this evidence was obtained legally. He placed the briefcase on the table, opening it to reveal stacks of neatly organized documents. The forged power of attorney was notarized through bribery. The notary has confessed. The fraudulent property sale was undervalued to evade taxes. There are credit applications using the victim's ID, and more than $120,000 in vehicle loan proceeds were misappropriated. He removed his glasses, fixing his gaze on Renata. We have sufficient grounds for charges of fraud, forgery, and embezzlement, carrying a combined sentence of 6 to 12 years in prison. Renata gripped the edge of a chair, her face ashen, crumbling. No, I'm a doctor. I have a reputation. You did, I said softly, almost a whisper. Once the medical board receives these documents, they'll open an investigation, and your license could be suspended or revoked. She looked at me as if I were a monster. You'd really do that? Destroy your own daughter? The question echoed through the quiet house. Khaled, Mara, Mr. Harrison, they all waited for my answer. I took 3 deep breaths before speaking. I don't know. I saw a flicker of surprise in her eyes, because part of me still remembered. The part that stayed up all night when you had a fever. The part that kept every drawing you made in elementary school, now tucked in that old shoebox in the house you sold. Tears rolled down Renata's cheeks, but they weren't from remorse. They were from pure, unadulterated rage. So this is blackmail. If I don't obey you, you'll ruin me. No, I said, stepping toward the desk. I opened a drawer and pulled out a worn leather folder. I brought this from America. You never knew it existed. And I'm giving you something you never gave me, the truth. I placed it in her trembling hands. Renata opened it. Inside was everything. The college tuition invoices, the bank transfer slips, George's debt repayment contracts, the deed of sale for my mother's ranch, all fully documented. The last page was the forensic report, the one I had never shown anyone. Cause of death: cranial trauma due to motor vehicle accident. Blood test results: blood alcohol content 4 times the legal limit. Driver was severely intoxicated. Renata read it once, then again, her hands shaking so hard the paper rustled. No, Dad didn't drink like that. You're making this up. The original report is still archived at the county medical examiner's office, I said steadily. Case number 4170. You can verify it yourself. Your father left the house at 10 p.m. after learning his project had gone bankrupt. He drank an entire bottle of whiskey, the one he'd been saving for a celebration, and drove off into the dark at reckless speed. My voice cracked. He wasn't running from me. He was running from his own shame. I tried to stay calm, but my voice shook. George was brilliant, yes, but also arrogant, impulsive, incapable of admitting mistakes. When his project collapsed, and he realized how many people had lost everything because of him, he couldn't face it. The words burst out of me, echoing through the house. And I hid the truth from you because you were 15. Because I was broken. Because I cried every night, calling his name. How could I tell my grieving daughter that her father died drunk, leaving me with debts that took 10 years to pay? The room fell silent. Even Renata stopped breathing for a moment. I took a deep breath, my voice lowering, heavy with decades of pain. I swallowed the truth, the anger, and the injustice of having to protect the honor of the man who left me in ruins. I worked myself to exhaustion, forgot what rest meant, because you needed both a mother and a father, even though he had never truly been either. Renata collapsed onto the sofa, the folder slipping from her hands, paper scattering across the floor like fragments of morning. I didn't know, she whispered, her voice raw, because I never asked, because blaming you was easier. I looked at her, my voice weary. So what now? Do you plan to sue me? Destroy me? I glanced around the grand room, at Khaled, at Mr. Harrison, then back at Renata. I'll give you a choice, I said slowly. Repay every dollar you stole. Legalize the house sale, or buy it back at market value. Cancel the loans in my name. Return the car you registered to yourself, including interest. I don't have that kind of money, she choked out. Then sell what you bought with it. Take out a loan. Refinance. Whatever it takes. You're a doctor. You have an income. Pay it back over 5 years if you must, but pay it. If I do that, you won't press charges. If you do that, I paused, weighing every single word. If you publicly admit what you did and apologize, I won't press charges. But from now on, our relationship ends. You'll only be my daughter by blood. You'll inherit nothing. You'll have no say in my life, no power over me ever again. Renata's voice broke, a pained cry. But I'm your only daughter. And I was once your only mother, I replied, my voice hard. And you left me at an airport like garbage. This time, her tears were real. Her shoulders shook violently. A part of me, the mother who had lived for 33 years, wanted to hold her. To forgive. To slip back into that old, comfortable role of enduring for peace. But I didn't. I chose to keep my dignity. You have 72 hours to decide, Mr. Harrison said, gathering the documents. After that, we'll proceed with criminal charges. Renata stumbled out of the house without looking back. When the door closed, I sank into the chair she just occupied and cried harder than I had since George's funeral. Khaled sat beside me, silent, a comforting presence. You did the right thing, he said quietly. Then why does it hurt so much? I whispered, my voice thick with tears. Because motherhood isn't a switch you can turn off, he said softly, putting an arm around me. But it does have a limit, the point where you finally protect yourself. And today you found it. I sat there in the strange stillness that follows irreversible choices, knowing I had crossed a line I could never return from. And strangely, I had never felt freer. 3 heavy, agonizing days passed. Renata didn't call, didn't text, didn't reply. Mr. Harrison called daily, patiently asking if he should file the charges. I kept asking for 24 more hours, then another 24, clinging to the faint, foolish hope that she'd choose to do the right thing. On the 4th day, Khaled called me into his office. He sat behind his large wooden desk, his posture tense, his expression grim and serious. "I need to tell you something," he began, fingers interlaced, "and it will change everything between us." My stomach instantly tightened. After 4 months in this foreign world, I knew sentences like that never, ever led to good news. "What is it?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Do you remember when we met at the airport?" he said. "And I told you I needed a legal wife to appear in meetings?" That was true, but it wasn't the whole truth. I stood up, facing him, my heart hammering. "Explain." Khaled sighed, a deep, weary sound. "My son, Rashid, isn't just trying to take over the company. He's filed a petition in court claiming I'm mentally unfit. He says my grief has affected my judgment. And here, the law tends to favor the children. But you're perfectly sound." I blurted out. "You and I both know that." "We do," he agreed. "But Rashid hired 3 psychiatrists willing to certify otherwise. If he wins, I lose control of the company, my accounts, my properties, even my freedom to travel." His voice dropped, raw with vulnerability. "Our marriage wasn't just a business arrangement, Denise. It was legal proof of competency. A man capable of marrying, signing contracts, maintaining a stable relationship cannot be declared incompetent." I stood there, still as stone. He had used me. More subtly than Ranetta, yes. More kindly, but still used me. "You manipulated me." "Not in the way you think," Khaled said, stepping around the desk, his eyes pleading. "Everything I gave you was real. The money, the job, the protection, the respect. I just withheld part of the reason." "I'm sorry. Why tell me now?" I demanded, needing to understand. "Because the court just ruled." He handed me a stack of documents. Rashid's petition was dismissed. The judge cited my recent marriage and active business involvement as proof of full mental competence. "I'm free. And you saved me without even knowing it." I looked at the attached English translation, reading it 3 times to let the words sink in. "So now you don't need me anymore." "Legally," he admitted, stepping closer. "No. But beyond the law, yes. You've brought life back into this house, intelligence to the work, and companionship I didn't even know I needed. Our contract still has 6 weeks left, but I want to propose something else." I looked at him, and for the first time, saw genuine hesitation, almost fear in his eyes. "Not another contract or extension," he said, his voice soft. "A real beginning. No roles, no obligations. Just 2 people, if they choose, building something honest." I stayed silent. Part of me, the old, wounded part, wanted to scream that he was just like every other man. But the part of me that had grown so fiercely in these 4 months knew he was just trying to survive, just like I once had. "I need time to think," I said. "Of course," he replied, relief washing over his face. "But know this, what I feel isn't strategy." I left the office, my mind spinning, and stood at the window, watching the sunlight shimmer on the sea. I realized I was no longer the fragile woman who had stepped into that Mercedes 4 months ago, just hoping to survive. This woman wanted to live. Fully. My phone rang. Unknown number. U.S. area code. "Mom." Renata's voice. It trembled. "I need to see you. Please. Can you come to the hotel where I'm staying?" My first instinct was to refuse, to shut her out completely. But her voice, shaky, exhausted, raw, it made me hesitate. "Which hotel?" "Atlantis. Room 2847. Please, Mom. It's important." I hung up, my hand still clutching the phone. On one side was Khaled, with his half-truth confession. On the other, Ranata, with her desperate plea. I went downstairs and found Khaled reading documents. "Ranata wants to meet," I said. "I'm going." He stood immediately. "I'll drive you. And I'll wait outside, just in case." The drive was silent, filled only with the thrumming of the engine and the frantic beat of my heart. When we arrived, he took my hand gently. "Whatever you decide with her, with me, with your life, choose what you truly want, Denise. Not what's easy. Not what's expected." I stepped out of the car, my heart racing, and took the elevator up to the 20th floor. I knocked on the door of room 2847. It opened. Renata stood there, her hair messy in a bun, wearing a crumpled sweatshirt, her face swollen from crying. And sitting on the sofa beside her was Matthew, her husband, the attorney who had helped her file paperwork and cover her tracks. "If he's here," I said immediately, my voice firm. "I'm not stepping inside. That man needs to leave, Renata." "Matthew, get out!" Renata shouted, her voice strong enough to make him stand up and walk out without another word. When the door closed, she collapsed onto the sofa and burst into tears, her body trembling violently. "He left me," she sobbed, "when he found out you had enough evidence to press charges." Matthew packed his bags and left. He said he wouldn't risk his career for my family drama. I stood there, arms crossed, forcing myself not to give in to the old instinct to go and hold her. "So, you called me here for pity?" "No." She lifted her tearful eyes to meet mine, to ask for forgiveness. A real apology. Not because I'm cornered, but because, her voice cracked, because I finally understand what I've done. I understand how. She took a shuddering breath. "I read every document you gave me, every receipt, every payment, every figure. You worked for nearly 10 years to pay for my education. You sold Grandma's ranch to protect Dad's honor. And I turned all of that into a weapon against you." I nodded slowly. "Yes, because it was easier for you to hate me than to face the truth. That you spent 25 years worshiping a man who didn't deserve it. Because admitting that would mean accepting you're not the flawless child you thought you were. Maybe you're just human." The room fell silent, except for the faint hum of the air conditioner. "You're not ordinary, Renata," I said. "You're a skilled doctor, successful. But you—" I paused, searching for the word. "You've been cruel, selfish, and so obsessed with a competition that never existed between us that you forgot how to be kind." "I know," she whispered, "and I don't think I deserve forgiveness. But I'll repay everything. I'll sell the car, take loans, work extra shifts. I'll meet every condition you gave me." I sat down across from her, exhausted to the point where every muscle in my body ached. "Why?" I asked. "Because he left you? Because you're alone? Because I realized you were alone, too," she said softly, her eyes meeting mine. "And even then you never abandoned me until I forced you to." We sat there, mother and daughter, separated by 4 months and 25 years of pain. I knew forgiveness couldn't happen instantly, but maybe with time it might come. 2 years later, I sat on the balcony of my apartment in Muscat, watching the sun sink into the Gulf, painting the distant mountains in shades of orange and violet. Next to me was a pile of reports from the hotel we'd opened 3 months earlier, the Elasmir Boutique, the first in a chain of 5 locations we planned to build. 91% occupancy, a 4.8-star average rating, first quarter profits exceeding projections. My phone buzzed. A message from Mara, now the general manager of the Dubai branch. "Mrs. Denise, a guest from room 304 asked for you personally. They said they'll return when you're available." I smiled. That was the kind of problem I liked. Khaled stepped onto the balcony, holding 2 cups of cardamom tea. He looked a bit older now, more gray in his hair, deeper lines around his eyes. But his expression was lighter, freer than ever. He sat beside me. "The final blueprints for the Salalah Hotel just arrived," he said. "Do you want to see them today or tomorrow?" "Tomorrow," I replied, leaning back, savoring the moment. "Today, I just want to enjoy this." I pointed toward the sea where the sunset glowed crimson, the place where my new life had been rebuilt, brick by beautiful brick. Legally, our contract marriage had ended 18 months earlier. But when that day came, neither of us mentioned divorce. Instead, Khaled simply asked, "Would you like to go out for dinner?" We went. And the next morning, we both woke up and went back to work as if there had never been an expiration date. There were no dramatic love confessions or movie-style gestures, just quiet companionship, mutual respect, and an understanding born from shared solitude. "Rashid called yesterday," Khaled said evenly. "He wants to talk, to make peace." "And what did you say?" I told him the door would open when he apologized sincerely, not when he wanted to bargain. He took a sip of tea, smiling faintly. "I learned from you that dignity is never negotiable." My phone buzzed again. A video call from Eleanor. Her face appeared on the screen, freshly dyed blonde hair, a radiant smile. Guess who's here? The camera turned slightly. Renata. She looked completely different. Short hair, no makeup, a simple blouse. And in her hands, a familiar folder. I brought the final payment, she said softly but firmly. All loans repaid with interest. And Eleanor witnessed it. Eleanor held up a document to the camera. I checked everything, Denise. She did it. Down to the last cent, I felt a lump in my throat. Renata had sold her apartment, moved into a rental, taken extra shifts, lived frugally, all to repay what she'd taken. Thank you for confirming, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Mom, Renata started, then corrected herself. Denise, I don't expect you to see me as your daughter again. I know I destroyed that, but I want you to know, I'm trying to become the kind of person you deserve in your life. Khaled placed his hand gently over mine, a quiet, steady warmth. I see that, I said, and I respect it, but rebuilding trust takes time. A lot of time. I understand, she said softly, her eyes glistening but dry. I don't expect anything else. I just want you to know. I'll be here when you're ready. I ended the call and looked out at the darkening sea. Khaled sat quietly beside me. Will you forgive her? He asked. I don't know, I admitted. Maybe full forgiveness isn't possible. Then I smiled faintly. But I can give her the chance to prove she's changed. 3 months later, I launched the New Beginnings Project, a free training center for women over 60 who wanted to return to work. There, they learned computer skills, hotel management, professional cooking, and basic business administration. The first class had 18 students, widows, exhausted women, forgotten souls like me. During the opening session, when I shared my story, everyone cried. A 73-year-old woman raised her hand and asked, "Weren't you afraid to start over at this age?" I laughed gently. I was terrified, I told them. But I learned that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing not to let fear control you. The program grew quickly. 6 months later, we added 2 more classes. A year later, Yuki, my Japanese friend from Dubai, opened a branch in Tokyo. Ingrid, my Danish friend, organized internships at her gallery. We became a global network of women, stepping out of the shadows together. Renata even came to the opening of the second branch in Miami. She didn't speak to me, just volunteered quietly all day, serving coffee, arranging chairs, helping elderly women fill out forms. When the ceremony ended, our eyes met for a brief moment. No words, no smiles, but in that glance, there was something fragile, small yet real. A beginning. Now at 70, I divide my time between Oman, Dubai, and the U.S. Khaled is still by my side, not as a husband, but as a true companion. We have our own rooms, our own lives, but share dinner whenever we can. On lonely nights, just knowing someone in the next room understands that emptiness is enough. Rashid finally apologized to his father, and they're slowly rebuilding their relationship. As for me, I've learned that starting over doesn't mean erasing the past. It means choosing which parts of it to carry and which to leave behind. In the desert, where the woman I once was will rest forever. I still think about George sometimes, not with guilt, but with understanding. I loved a flawed man, and he loved me in his clumsy way. We both did the best we could with what we had. Renata still texts every Sunday, sharing stories about her patients, her therapy sessions. I don't always reply, but I always read them. Forgiveness may not be complete, but watching someone truly try to change, that I can give. Last week, I received a package from the U.S. Inside was a photo album. Renata had restored all the old pictures. My childhood on the ranch, our wedding, rare photos of George smiling, and images of her as a little girl. Attached was a small note. I thought you'd want to keep your memories. Not out of expectation or guilt, but because they're yours. I held the album and cried, not from sadness, but from understanding. Memories are ours to keep. But the future is what we choose. And I choose a future where I wake to the sound of waves along the coast of Oman, build sanctuaries for travelers, teach women to rediscover their worth, sip tea beside a man who sees me as his equal, and let my daughter exist at the edge of my life, respected, but no longer its center. Looking back on everything, I've realized love isn't always unconditional sacrifice. Sometimes love means knowing when to stop, to protect yourself. Forgiveness doesn't happen in a single day. And family isn't always about blood. It's about the people who stay when you have nothing left to give. It took me years to understand that kindness needs boundaries. And sometimes, distance is what allows love to heal. If you've ever been hurt by family, if you've had to rebuild yourself after loss, I truly hope this story reminds you that it's never too late to start again. What do you think is the difference between forgiving and forgetting? Let me know in the comments.